Thanks for checking out this movie review video. So this is for the 1984 film Silent Madness. This is a Vinegar Syndrome release, as you can probably tell from the awesome art on this awesome slipcover. I didn't flip the artwork on the inside, which I usually do, but I can show you what the alternate cover is. So on the inside, I just kept this. I kept it because it's different enough. It's a little bit of a, it's an expansion of this, which is better than this, in my opinion. Kind of lame, if you ask me. Looks more like a sci-fi-ish type thing. So yeah, this film is in 3D. They do include two of these 3D glasses, which are pretty fun. I also love the little detail here of putting both the covers on the sides. Pretty awesome. I watched a little bit in their 3D, and it's fine. You know, like, it works for what the old 3D is. I just don't know how many people are going to prefer to watch the film that way. For me, it's like, it'll give me a headache if I watch it too much. So I just watched it in 2D. So, gonna tell you up front, heard some things about this one, saw some people online being like, oh man, this is kind of required viewing for people who are fans of slashers. I wasn't real high on it. Obviously, I'm going to rate it as an overall film, and I'm also going to rate it as a So Bad It's Good film, because it's definitely more on the So Bad It's Good side, but I wasn't a huge fan of it. But there's definitely some stuff I enjoyed, so let me get into it. Silent Madness, which, by the way, I love the title. Love the title, Silent Madness. Directed by Simon Nuchtern, who also did The Girl Grabbers, To Hex with Sex, Snuff, and Savage Dawn, just to name a few, which I believe Joe Bob had covered Savage Dawn for, oh no, that's Deadbeat by Dawn. Alright, I'm confused on that one. I know I've seen Savage Dawn somewhere, so someone remind me what that one's about. Written by Nuchtern as well as Bob Zimmerman, who also wrote Underground, and Bill Milling, who also wrote Virgin Snow, All American Girls 2, In Heat, In the Pink, Savage Dawn, Wolfpack, which is another Vinegar Syndrome release I want to check out, Caged Fury, and South Beach Academy, just to name a few. Alternate titles for this film were Dark Sunday, Beautiful Screamers, The Omega Factor, and The Night Killers. I like how it was, like, plural, even though there's one killer. Well, two killers, actually, in it. In the end. When the movie starts in an asylum, you know that's where the killer will come from. It's one of those films that it's very straightforward. We believe it's very straightforward until we get that nice kind of Friday the 13th-esque twist at the end of the film, which I did enjoy that aspect of it. But you immediately assume, oh, okay, they're accidentally releasing a patient who Dr. Gilmore is very concerned about. So here we go. This is what's going to happen. This is going to end up being the killer, which he is the killer for the duration of the film until we find out about the past. And you think the past is where he started killing, but it's not. He witnessed his mother killing, and then he became a killer himself. So, yeah. An honest mistake to release Howard Johns instead of John Howard. I thought that was kind of like a funny mix-up. And it's like, well, obviously these people who are in a position where they should really be paying attention to who they're discharging are not paying attention to who they're discharging. And these people, not only are they bad at their jobs for not making sure they're discharging the right person, but they also then try to cover it up. Like, they're terrible people because they're like, oh, there's a heavily psychotic person out there who's been proven, at this point they think, proven to be a murderer in the past. Let's just cover this one up and let it go. Because the guys were just going to let it go. It's Dr. Anderson later who's the person who's like, let's kind of like on the low just like get this dude killed. Because we've already said that he's deceased to Sheriff Liggett. The first kills are all right. The 3D axe throw is a really funny one if you're not watching it in 3D. Just like how fake it looks and how it's going like right up to the screen. And I will say that this film really does wear its 3D moments on its sleeve when you're watching it in 2D. You can definitely see all those moments where you're just like, oh yeah, this is a 3D moment. This is a 3D moment. So it kind of does make you want to at least check out the 3D aspect of it. So that's kind of nice. When Howard snags the third victim, he does it in broad daylight with plenty of people around. which made me chuckle. That's the one where he like jumps out, the girl's on the sidewalk thing, and he like jumps out of a bush and just like grabs her, and it's broad daylight. It's on a college campus, and there are other people around. Like, they're not that far from him, so people would have heard it, people would have seen it. That's not the first time that there's like a spatial awareness problem going on in this film. I'll talk more about another one in a little bit, but that just kind of made me chuckle how ridiculous it was that no one reacted to the fact that this woman just got grabbed. Also, people would have known he was just hiding in that bush. He wasn't that conspicuous. Pretty creepy scene with Dr. Gilmore checking on all the heavily sedated patients, which is obviously where Howard was. Yeah, really well shot. They made it look very, like, not just creepy, but, like, sinister, what they were doing with the patients there. And Dr. Gilmore even says something about it later, about what you're doing to these poor people, which, you know, Howard was one of those poor people. Not really a poor person, you know what I mean? Like a killer. Dr. Gilmore's coworkers sure do seem like they should be patients themselves. Mainly in the beginning, Virgil and Jesse, because those are the two lackeys who literally seem like they may be homicidal, and they end up basically being that way. But then you have Dr. Kruger. Oh, I wonder if that's a reference to some sort of movie. Yeah, obviously. And it breaks down into this kind of like men versus women thing in the beginning, because you have Dr. Gilmore, who's actually the only one who's concerned about the issues here and releasing someone like Howard. And then you have Dr. Anderson, who steps in to kind of back up Dr. Gilmore at first. And it's this whole like women trying to do the right thing, men not caring and trying to, you know, cover up their blunders at any cost, no matter what that means to, you know, other people getting murdered. And unfortunately, it does kind of change a little bit then when Dr. Anderson's kind of like, all right, let's keep this covered up and let's go get Jesse to go murder, Jesse and Virgil to go murder this guy. It's just, woof. A sorority spells vulnerability in these types of films, yes. In any sort of slasher, as soon as they're going to a sorority house, you know that says to you vulnerability, because back then it's like, oh, these women are so defenseless. You know, they're young, they're females, because back then when we were making these films, women were seen as inordinately weak in these movies, and therefore they would have almost no chance of overpowering this guy. Although there would always be like the one woman who can, and then all the other women in the film would have no chance, and the one woman obviously being Dr. Gilmore, which I'll talk more about her big moment, which I enjoyed in a bit. The steam kill in this film was a good idea, but I do wish that they had shown more. That kind of speaks to just my issue with the kills in this film in general, is they had some solid ideas. I just don't like the way they were executed, because you don't really see a whole lot. And with a film that's kind of like not great, it's not like a great film, obviously, you want to get something out of it. Like, you want good practical effects. Now, we get one nice practical effects moment when Jesse gets drilled in the back of his head accidentally by Virgil, obviously with the trap that was set up by Howard in order to kill Dr. Gilmore. But that was one bright moment. That was probably the only kill bright moment. Like I said, there were some good kill ideas. I just wanted them to show it with practical effects. My thought on that, why they didn't, is probably because money, budget, would be my guess. And the men at the asylum cover up their mistakes while the women there try to get to the bottom of it and be responsible. Speaks to what I was talking about, the whole men versus women thing back then. But then, I'm not mean back then as in like back in that time, in the movie. Back then in the movie. But then it all falls apart because Dr. Anderson basically takes the side of Dr. Kruger and his lackeys. And then it's Dr. Gilmore's mission to clean up the mess that Dr. Kruger and his flunkies created. You get the idea immediately that she's going to be the main character, that she's the one with the moral compass here. They go pretty hard at that, so then you know she's going to be involved with this. She's going to feel a sense of responsibility. Even after she goes to the sheriff kind of brushes her off, and she finds one male ally, like the only male ally she can find in Mark at I forget the town he's in, but at the newspaper in that town, Baronsville or something like that. I like Mark's plan to have Dr. Gilmore go undercover as a former sorority sister. I thought that was smart, interesting. I thought it could have led to more interesting things within the film. doesn't lead to a whole lot of interesting stuff in the film, but it is a good idea to get her inside the sorority house, where at this point in the film, we know that's where Howard is. He has returned because that's the place he knows, plus that's a place where we don't know at this point, but that's where his mother is, so he's going back there for that reason too. The flashback footage of Howard watching the girls is creepy, but then it actually becomes funny because of the acting and how the girls do such a terrible job of trying to escape the perils of the nail gun that's being shot at them. Like, that scene starts really creepy, and you're like, oh man, this is kind of like messed up and creepy. And then it just devolves into this like, oh, it's just kind of laughable and crappy, because especially the guy who played Howard, his acting in that scene was just like so ridiculous. Also, I love the fact that they just put like all this red on his face, like somehow that indicates like you're psychotic, you know? It's just kind of ridiculous. And of course, Dr. Gilmore and Mark start falling for each other. You always have to have some sort of romantic bent in these types of films. There was that pressure to do that in many decades of film, not just in horror films. But yeah, it feels forced. It doesn't feel that realistic. And they don't even play with it that much. There's really only 2 scenes where it matters that they're kind of falling for each other. The one where they're having the meal together, and then the other one, the very end of the film, when they're going to take off together. Pretty much it. The acting of the security guard, the guy who played Hackler, who randomly pops up in the basement, was fun. He was one of the performances I really did enjoy, and it really made me wish that his role was a lot larger. We really only get that one sequence with him, and then he's found dead later, and I was just like, no, not Hackler, he's my favorite. Justice for Hackler. Sheriff Liggett seems like the most demure police officer I've ever seen in a film. He seems like his demeanor is just so demure, ineffective, just weak. And his acting style I actually quite enjoyed too, because it's kind of like funny, a little bit over the top-ish. And I love the fact that he's like drinking on the job. He didn't really give a crap. At one point when he first stands up, like his shirt's kind of like untucked, which by the way, on the shirt front, yeah, Attack the Block, and yes, it does glow in the dark, actually. Great shirt, great movie. But anyway, yeah, I just love how like Liggett's just kind of like, I don't really care about my job. Dr. Anderson shows she's not all good when she wants Jesse to go find and kill Howard. Already talked about that. Moving on. I do like when Mark is flipping out on Jane when they find her sister and her sister's boyfriend's van. At that point, they didn't find the bodies yet, but like, the flipping out that Mark does on her, like, yes, she's kind of hysterical, but, like, that's where you try and calm someone. He just starts, like, yelling at her and kind of, like, pushing her, putting hands on her, and then he does it later, too, when they go back to the sorority house, and they're trying to make the phone call. I think it's at the sorority house, and then he's trying to get a hold of Sheriff Liggett, and he's just like, no, you need to call. And then he flips out on her again, and he's, like, yelling at her when she's clearly grieving and in shock and afraid. All these things. The guy is just a jerk. He's not a great dude, to be honest. How does Pam not notice Cheryl being murdered right near her? I said I was going to get to this other moment where spatial awareness is ridiculous within this film. When Cheryl is playing the video game Dragon's Lair, which awesome to see that in there. They also put that in Stranger Things season 3, I think it was. Yeah, I think it was season 3. So good to see Dragon's Lair in there. So she's standing there, and then she gets killed. She gets, like, box knifed in the back. Meanwhile, Pam is hanging upside down doing pull-ups. Or actually, she isn't even. She's just, like, rotating from side to side. She would have seen and she would have heard what was going on with Cheryl. But she doesn't. That's another just real stupid spatial awareness thing. Like the moment when, you know, Howard abducts the one woman in broad daylight on a campus. So anyway. When Jesse knocks out Mark, what's the plan after that? He assaults the guy for no good reason. Also, if you hear noise in the background, neighbors. Sorry. But when Jesse knocks out Mark, what's the plan after that? He assaults the guy for no good reason. Yeah, Jesse takes out Mark, and then Mark, what are you going to do about that, honestly? Like, they're trying to get in there and kind of covertly do things, and it's not covert to, like, have this confrontation with Mark, be seen where they're trying to go, and then knock him out, because then he's going to come after you. Not bright, though. The fight scene with Virgil, Jesse, and Howard is awful. And also, why doesn't Howard kill them at that point? Choreography of it, really laughable, really stupid. Also, the fact that Virgil was way more focused on going after Dr. Gilmore than he was Howard just seemed ridiculous. But on top of that, Howard would have killed them because he's been killing people and he's in danger at that moment. So why wouldn't he do that? It just doesn't make a whole lot of sense. Real quick, pause for horror hydration. Thanks. And sorry about that. Funny moment when Howard bites the syringe. It was this weird thing, like he's hanging from the top in the basement, and then Virgil like jams the syringe into his mouth and like starts shooting it, and he like bites down, breaks it apart. It's just a funny moment. I did enjoy that aspect of the film. Just those, those little moments that are just kind of ridiculous, over the top, and fun. Solid effect when Jesse's head gets drilled. Again, already talked about that. That's the only good kill, in my opinion, in this film. I did quite like it, though. They set it up well. The pursuit scene where Howard's going after Dr. Gilmore is okay. It was decent. But I did quite like the inclusion of getting into the air ducts. That was probably the best part. It feels like she's in the most peril there because she's in a confined space and she can't really get out. Plus, he's then using that like claw hook thing that rotates, which I assume is used for like cleaning out drains or something like that, or big pipes. I don't know. But yeah, that I enjoyed that. Dr. Gilmore breaking the mirror is a strong moment. This is where she really, really, really gets to fight back. But then, standing in contrast, is when Mark shows up like a doofus trying to shoot a shotgun from behind his back. I mean, I appreciate that he's trying to do something. I appreciate he's trying to get in there, save her, but she had things handled way better than he did. He fires the second shot, which was because the other one had been shot earlier accidentally by Dr. Gilmore, and he just looks dumb and he's ineffective and everything. So yeah, that's that. But I love her moment where she breaks the mirror, grabs the shard, and just goes after him. Pretty nice. I did have a feeling that Howard was actually Francis, Mrs. Carlin's son, because they put so much of an emphasis on her and telling her story in the beginning of the film, and the whole like losing her son Francis thing. It made me very suspicious at that point. I'm just like, this dude Howard was probably Francis. So that ends up coming out, but it is a solid twist, especially because it's then revealed at that point that Mrs. Collins was the original killer. So that's some very, like I said before, very Friday the 13th Mrs. Voorhees type stuff, which I enjoy that. So the very end of the film with Dr. Gilmore and Mark getting in the car together, awful. Not a good way to end the film. I think it would have been better if they kind of ended it with Collins being taken away, and that's just kind of it. You don't need to circle back to the almost non-existent relationship between Mark and Dr. Gilmore, but they did, and whatever. For what this movie is, I do have to say it is way too slow. It's only like an hour and 33 minutes with the credits and everything, but the pacing is way too slow for not being like a good film, and it's a slasher film. It's just pretty slow. So I don't know if this is one I'll watch again or not. I would watch it with some other people maybe, but yeah. As an overall film in the pantheon of all films, out of 5 stars with half stars in play, I'm going to give it 1 star. As a so bad it's good film, I'm going to give it 2 stars, because I didn't totally hate it, but I'm not in the middle on it either. I kind of didn't like it too much, but enjoyed some of it. So this is where I want to hear your feelings on Silent Madness. Go ahead and put it in the comments. Love it, hate it, in between, all that stuff. Give me like a sentence or two at least. I just don't like when people are just like it, don't like it, because that doesn't mean a whole lot to me. But do me a favor, hit subscribe to my channel if you haven't already. Would greatly appreciate that. Also, hit the notification bell button, because then you'll know when I'm putting up new videos, which I'm doing 3 a week at this point. Regardless, really do thank you for checking out this video, and until next time, keep it brutal.